This is an oil tanker navigating the Strait of Hormuz. The price of global energy relies on this choke point remaining open, yet the current standoff between the United States and Iran threatens to choke this artery and destabilize the global economy. Despite the threat of a wider Middle Eastern war erupting around these tankers, direct, high-level talks between Washington and Tehran are completely paralyzed. Understanding why these powers cannot sign a ceasefire agreement requires looking past the official table and into three specific variables: strategy, internal politics, and proxies. These forces act as invisible weights, pinning the negotiation table in place and preventing a deal. Deconstructing how these variables interact is the only way to accurately forecast how this geopolitical crisis will finally break. The first variable trapping both sides is the ghost of their own past diplomatic playbooks. For decades, the default strategy was heavy economic sanctions, a blunt instrument meant to squeeze a nation into submission. But complete isolation rarely yields long-term stability. The Obama administration attempted a pivot, shifting away from economic pressure toward direct diplomatic channels, a model mirrored in the reopening of relations with Cuba. The logic was that steady dialogue would outpace the effects of economic punishment. That logic hit a wall when the Trump administration abruptly reversed course, demonstrating to Tehran that years of diplomatic bridge building could be dismantled overnight by a new executive order. In place of traditional negotiations, the administration deployed the Madman theory. The tactic involves a leader acting aggressively unpredictable, intentionally projecting a willingness to take extreme measures to force concessions. The theory collapsed when Iran matched the extremity. Geopolitical unpredictability is also expensive. Economic markets react poorly to chaos, and domestic financial pressures ultimately constrain how far a leader can push a madman persona. These failures have engineered a strategic trap. Heavy economic pressure breeds deep resentment, yet direct diplomacy now lacks any guarantee of surviving the next election cycle. That brings us to the second variable: internal political survival and succession. In the United States, politicians are already positioning themselves for a post-Trump landscape. Figures like J.D. Vance must balance their own future influence with the current demands of the base, a calculation that restricts their willingness to risk political capital on a controversial foreign compromise. Tehran faces an even steeper internal hurdle. The looming succession of the supreme leader creates deep uncertainty within the government. During a transitional phase, factions fracture, and no official wants to be seen signing a perceived surrender to the West. Compounding this is the influence of Iran's military apparatus and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Even if political officials seek de-escalation, the military maintains its own hardline objectives, preventing a unified national negotiating stance. The result is two governments trapped by national pride. They prioritize projecting unyielding strength to their domestic audiences over making the practical concessions required for peace. The final variable operates entirely outside of the negotiating room, the chaotic escalation driven by regional proxy groups. While diplomats argue over terminology, groups on the ground operate on their own timelines. As seen in the mobilization in Lebanon, these factions create a parallel conflict that easily derails theoretical peace talks. This triggers a highly dangerous chain reaction. If Israel initiates strikes against Hezbollah targets in the north, Iran is forced to retaliate to protect its proxy network and maintain its regional credibility. These proxy operations actively sabotage any momentum toward de-escalation. They transform diplomatic disagreements into active firefights, rendering the official negotiation table useless. When you combine broken trust, volatile internal power shifts, and heavily armed rogue proxies, the traditional model of state-to-state diplomacy stops functioning. Looking ahead, this leaves three probable outcomes. The first is the status quo, an indefinite loop of low-level skirmishes, persistent economic strain, and a refusal to publicly yield ground. The second outcome is escalation. A single miscalculation by a proxy group, like the downing of this American spy drone, crosses a red line, forcing both nations into a direct military conflict. The third outcome is the sudden deal. In this scenario, Washington pushes for a rapid compromise, seeking a high-profile signing ceremony to broadcast during the 250th anniversary of the United States. For a sudden deal to work, Iran requires a tangible payoff. Their primary objective remains the release of $6 billion in frozen oil revenue currently held in accounts in Doha, Qatar. This deadlock proves that getting two leaders to agree in principle is no longer enough to secure peace. Until internal power transitions are settled and regional proxies are disarmed, the threat of global fallout remains entirely unresolved.